So we've seen headlines in recent days about two men, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman and Jared Kushner. Let's talk about what you can do for your country or what you can do to your country. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kushner here. So over the last couple of days, we've seen some articles written about two men, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman and Jared Kushner. One man, an Army officer for more than 2 decades who testified about Donald Trump's abuse of office and abuse of power, and the other man, Donald Trump's son-in-law. Let's start with Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. He was born in the Soviet Union, and he and his family fled an oppressive government, an authoritarian regime, and they came to the United States. Colonel Vindman testified about Donald Trump's abuse of office and abuse of power, which ultimately resulted in Donald Trump being impeached. And of course, as thanks for his truthful testimony, as thanks for honoring his oath of office and his duty to country, Donald Trump and his allies retaliated against Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and basically ran him out of the military. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman authored a column or an op-ed in the Washington Times that ran today, and I want to read just a little piece of it for you. He said, "The 23-year-old me, who was commissioned in the Army in December 1998, could never have imagined the opportunities and experiences I have had. I joined the military to serve the country that sheltered my family's escape from authoritarianism, and yet the privilege has been all mine." That's how he sums up his military service. The privilege has been all mine. After more than 21 years of military service, after what he did for his country, he continues, "I made the difficult decision to retire because a campaign of bullying, intimidation, and retaliation by President Trump and his allies forever limited the progression of my military career." So that's what Donald Trump put this Purple Heart recipient through. So in recent days, there have been some articles written about another man, Jared Kushner. And let me just read one of the headlines in the last 24 hours that caught my attention. It reads as follows: Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner earned at least $36 million in outside income last year, new disclosures show. And the article continues that the disclosures were a little bit murky and not terribly complete that Jared and Ivanka made. So their actual outside income last year was somewhere between $36 million on the low end and $157 million on the high end. Do you know how much an Army lieutenant colonel makes? The Army pay chart is a matter of public record. You can look it up on the internet. They publish it. An Army colonel, Army lieutenant colonel, which is what Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was, earns somewhere between $5,700 a month up to a high of about $9,800 a month. So that was the salary range that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was earning after more than 2 decades of serving his country. Let's say, for the sake of argument, we go a little above the center line of that salary range for a lieutenant colonel and assume he was making $8,000 a month. You know how long Lieutenant Colonel Vindman would have to serve in the Army at $8,000 a month before he would earn just the bottom figure that was reported out that Jared and Ivanka earned in outside income just last year? He'd have to serve 375 years. That's not the upsetting part. He chose to serve his country. He didn't choose to get rich. here's the upsetting part. What was reported by Vanity Fair over the last couple of days. So Jared Kushner, Donald Trump's son-in-law, was put in charge of a coronavirus task force that was supposed to put together a national plan for the testing crisis that we were experiencing in this country. Some might say that we're still experiencing in this country as a result of the federal government letting us down. So Jared Kushner was put in charge of this task force, and here is some of what we learned from the recent Vanity Fair reporting about how he headed up that task force effort. When Jared Kushner set out in March to solve the diagnostic testing crisis, his efforts began not with public health experts, but with bankers and billionaires. They saw themselves as the A-team of people who get stuff done. I substituted stuff for another word. Now, to their credit, this Jared Kushner-led task force went to work putting together a national plan that could be implemented to address the coronavirus testing crisis the country was experiencing. And they made significant progress. They put a plan together. The plan was on the verge of being announced by the president in a Rose Garden ceremony. But then all of a sudden, some new information started coming in. It started to become apparent that the coronavirus was hitting the blue states, the Democratic states, much harder than it was hitting the red states. So all of a sudden, Jared's task force came up with a new strategy. Are you ready for this, folks? A member of Kushner's team expressed the following sentiment. Because the virus had hit the blue states hardest, a national plan was unnecessary and it wouldn't make sense politically. The article continues. The political folks believed that because the virus, was going to be relegated to Democratic states, they could blame those governors, and that would be an effective political strategy. Think about that. Letting the virus rip through the country, in Jared Kushner's estimation, was good political strategy because it was expected to hit the blue states where the Democrats were, much harder than it was expected to hit the red states. What can you do for your country? Well, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman knew how to answer that question. And as a result, he not only served more than 2 decades as a military officer at low pay, he not only was called upon to testify against the President of the United States about his abuse of office and abuse of power, and he did it because he said, "Here, right matters," but he received a Purple Heart Award for being injured in combat. Jared Kushner, what would he do to his country? Well, if there was a Black Heart Award for injuring your country, he would richly deserve to have a Black Heart pinned on his shirt. And I'm not going to say it's okay, but I am going to say, folks, that beginning in January, Jared Kushner and company will get theirs. Because beginning in January, a law-abiding president and a law-enforcing attorney general will begin a full, fair, apolitical grand jury investigation into Jared Kushner and Donald Trump and all of their criminal associates for what they've done to our country, to the American people. And every time I say the American people, I hasten to add to people who come here who may be described or characterized as undocumented, who come here looking for a better way of life for themselves, for their families, and what they get is having their children ripped away. They get thrown in one cage, their children get thrown in another. What Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and the rest of them did to this country, there will be accountability beginning in January. There will be grand jury investigations beginning in January. And beginning in January, we will see justice coming. Please stay safe, folks. I look forward to talking with you all again soon.